The next session I'm particularly excited about. It's fronted by someone who I consider a friend, someone who I also consider to be one of the nicest and most inspirational internal communicators in the game. And okay. And what's really great about this story is that I actually started this story at the very beginning. I remember talking with Pearson even before they were a Unity client, and I just knew from that point onwards we were going to have a good connection. And so some of you may have actually tuned into this story earlier than you remember, because Pearson actually spoke at Unite 22, where they let us into their lessons learned from launch and beyond, just 8 months into their journey. This year, we move on to Chapter 2, where we learn how they drive high-performance culture by supporting their managers. Please welcome to the stage the absolute legend that is Kim England. So you've got some content to talk, but I've got some questions for you, so I'm coming back.
Yeah, so Kaz and I do like to call Kaz a friend. I think he's awesome too. I think he did a great job actually this morning with Steve Bartlett. So I'm going to try and keep this really, really brief. But what I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of context about who Pearson is, as well as giving you a little bit of an insight into our platform, so you can kind of visualize it, so that when Kaz and I have a good old chat, you can kind of understand a little bit about what we've been up to. So firstly, let's get started in terms of who is Pearson. So some of you may have heard of the brand Pearson, but some of you may not know anything about Pearson. We are the world's leading learning company, and we operate in a 5 trillion global learning market. So it's a huge market, and we are a huge organisation and player within that. And what you can see from the slide that I've got up here is that we are around about 18,000 employees, but we can go up to around 35 to 40,000 at any sort of point in the year when we have seasonal casual staff. We're a global operation operating in a number of those countries that you see there. And along the bottom, if you're interested, you can see some of the dynamics in terms of the makeup of our population. The other really interesting thing about Pearson, which makes us quite unique, is we're 178 years old. So 2 more years and we will be celebrating our 180th birthday. And there are not many companies that can say that they are 180 years old. So that's a little bit about Pearson. And as Kaz said, we did launch last year. And when I came and spoke at Unite in September 2022, we were just 4 months old. So we were a baby. And over the last year, this is a little sort of indication, probably very small numbers in May, as we actually launched on the 16th, so it was halfway through the month. But what this shows you really is just how many views we've had in that last year, and obviously this number is rising. This is a comparison from year on year. We're now in September, and we're continuing to see that engagement increase. But before I talk a little bit more, I'd like to show you a video, because in May, we did celebrate what we like to call our Hub-iversary. And I think this video really just highlights a little bit about our platform, and you get a sneak peek into kind of what we're all about at Pearson. So if you can play or maybe I can play the video, I'm not sure. Do I have to click again? There we go. say, one of the things that really excites me about that video was that was created by our very own Dina Vicaria. Stand up, Dina. Wave. So it wasn't done by an agency. It was done by Dina with input from our entire team. And I get all the feels when I see that video, and really hope that we will be able to come here as a team and share with you what we do over the next 365 days. So it's super clear that we've been, really engaging with our employees, and I like to call it kind of the lowercase e. But actually, what we decided in September last year was to make a more intentional focus on engagement. And Chris, earlier in the session where he was talking about Gallup, really set me up quite nicely, actually, because we've been working and partnering with Gallup, because similar to Chris, we recognise that actually the companies that get engagement right actually will see some of these trends in terms of profitability, in terms of sales, in terms of customer loyalty, in terms of productivity, and actually that plus 66% in terms of well-being, I think is incredibly important when we think about some of the conversations we've heard from Steve this morning, Steve Bartlett, and Grace yesterday. So with that in mind, we started to think about how we could use the hub to bring some of that engagement to life. And so, move on to the next slide. I wanted to reintroduce Sarah. So if you were at Unite 2022 last year and you saw our presentation or saw my presentation, you would have been introduced to Sarah. She is the persona that we used when we launched the hub. So when we were thinking about the user experience, when we were thinking about the content that we would include on the hub, we thought about it through the lens of Sarah. What would Sarah need to see? What would Sarah be interested in understanding and knowing? And how would Sarah feel about some of the experiences that we built? So Sarah is from Texas. She likes coffee, tacos, and sci-fi. And what she didn't like was trying to find stuff at Pearson. Lucky for Sarah, we've been working on that. But like us, and we've been really, really busy over the last 365 days, so is Sarah, and she's been promoted. She is now a people manager. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've done on the hub specifically around engagement and performance, or engagement as a driver for performance, through the lens of a manager. And in this example, through the lens of Sarah, who is a brand new manager. So I'm going to do that through sort of three specific areas, which is one, how did we set the expectations? What's the expectations that, from us bringing in Gallup in terms of the engagement survey, and really helping people understand, the value of why we're doing this intentional focus on engagement, how we're supporting managers, and then how we've been learning from the best. So we'll start with setting expectations. So we've been partnering with Gallup. We had Gallup come in and do a live learning session with Ali Bibo, our CHRO, and it was a really great opportunity to introduce the State of the Workplace report in terms of what that means at a global level. And then when we did our survey in September, we were able to talk about that specifically in terms of what it meant to Pearson alongside our results. We've also had the opportunity to share news stories and really help our employees understand how we're sort of using engagement as a driver for performance, the successes, and being able to share those stories and news. And then we've also had lots of opportunities to learn more about engagement. So, I think lots of people think they're good at engagement, but actually, when you think about the intentional focus that we've had across Pearson, and in that partnership with Gallup, we've been able to really help our employees understand what that really means for them. So that's all on the hub through news. But as a manager, Sarah has some extra information. So we used the popular links feature. So if you see there, it's in blue. So if you're a people manager, you see that specific popular links when you do the drop down, and in there are some specific links, things like Gallup Access, Managers Corner Academy, which I'll come onto in just a second. And so what Sarah can do is jump straight from the homepage or anywhere within the hub and get to those quick links. We have Managers Corner Academy, which this has really been focused on the resources and support that Sarah might need in terms of having some of the conversations with her team. So if you're not familiar with Gallup, you essentially complete a survey. The survey is then turned around incredibly quickly, and managers who have more than 4 people who have completed the survey get a score, an engagement score, which then they're able to talk to the managers about. And so what we've provided through Managers Corner is a series of learning opportunities, whether that's resources or live sessions that managers can join to really help them with those conversations and help them figure out how they're going to focus on improving their engagement score for the following year. Oh, didn't realise it was going to move. There you go, it's moving. There we go. So the other thing that you will have seen from my moving screen is that we've also focused on the timeline widget. So I think I was in a session earlier today where we were talking about different widgets, or it might have been yesterday afternoon. And I really love the timeline widget, and I hear there's going to be some additions to it, because what the timeline widget allows us to do is really show our managers performance in an entire year. So quite often we're quite short term, thinking about, what the next thing is. What we've done with the timeline is given people the entire calendar, and then what we're able to do through the top of Managers Corner Academy is what do you need to focus on in this quarter. So they can kind of see the big picture as well as what's expected of them over the next couple of, over the next quarter, couple of months. Okay, and so lastly, we looked at how we could really upskill and reskill our managers. And we've been really focusing on learning from the best. So we looked at the top quartile managers, and we've really been thinking about what is it, the behaviours that they have, what are the things that those managers are doing. And so in May, we had our Learning at Work week, which was focused on a number of areas, our 3 priorities, but there was an engagement track in there as well. And one of the most popular sessions was an opportunity for people to hear from those senior leaders, or not necessarily senior leaders, I should say, managers who had scored in the top quartile. And we called the session The Secret Sauce, and it was a really great opportunity for people to listen to those managers and learn. And it was so successful that we've now turned that into a written series. And so we've now got stories on the hub as well, where we're sharing what various different managers across the organisation are doing. But that's not all. We do also have other opportunities. So we've had other stories where we've been able to focus on what other people across the organisation are doing, either through the lens of what they're doing for our customers in terms of execution, but also in terms of things like DE&I and other areas. So, there we go. There's leading through disruption and learning from the best. So lastly, you guys didn't know I was going to put this in here, did you? So, so this is our team. And so one of the things that I wanted to share is that actually one of the things that we do within our team, and I think you probably saw it from the video, is we really give our employees a reason to believe. And it doesn't matter what score we've got in engagement if people don't believe in the purpose and the mission of the organisation. And I think one of the great things that I get to do, and I'm very privileged to do, is work with these amazing people. So if you are from Pearson, wave your hand in the air like you just don't care. And the only person that is missing from this picture is Maren Beckman, who is literally the machine behind our hub, because she's the one that keeps the wheels on the bus, does the upgrades. And so if you haven't already had an opportunity to speak to the team, please do. They will be at the party tonight, or you can connect with us on LinkedIn. But one of the things that I will say is it really does take a village. We couldn't do it on our own, any individual one of us, and it takes everybody. And the reason the Ted Lasso quote is there is because when we had our team meeting in Hoboken and we went to Coney Island as a little treat, we had that up on the wall, because that is really what our job is about. That is our goal, is to give our employees a reason to believe. And so here's the amazing team. I'm very proud to work with all of you, and happy to take some questions. Kaz, because I know you've got... Oh, you've gone there. I swear, did he not go off that side?
I'm here, there, and everywhere. Do you have a slide, by the way? Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Kim. Do you have a slide?
A slide?
A slide.
Oh, now I'll sit here because I'm here.
Roasted. So, when we discussed the content, I actually made a suggestion. You made the exact same suggestion to our kind of content team. Because I basically said to Casey, our comms manager, I want to sit down with Kim and like dive into some of that content. And then, literally, the next day, I think when you had your call with Casey was like, do you know what? Kim said the same thing. And like, so the alignment, when we didn't even discuss, was great. And so what I did was I kind of looked ahead at some of your content. We had a call, and I think you guys genuinely do look like and operate like the internal comms team of the future. And I think there are so many great platforms, but actually there's a partly a mindset change and a way of working, and I really wanted to tap into that and ask you some questions about it. For me, it starts with the personas, like the real personas, because I've spoken a lot about personas. You inspired me last year. I created a whole masterclass content around creating real personas, and obviously at the beginning of the project, so many people start with the idea that you want to start simple, but then that snowballs very quickly. How did you stick to Sarah without creating 100 different personas? Being, oh, what about this? What about this?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because I think, with all full disclosure, there was a point at which, when we were very, very early on in the implementation, we had a PowerPoint deck with a number of personas.
Yep.
And actually what happened is Sarah really stuck. And I think the reason Sarah stuck is because it became like a bit of a narrative. So, when you're in conversations and you're saying, oh, we want this piece of content on the hub, or, we really think this is really important. What you can do with a persona like Sarah is you can kind of bring it round to saying, why does Sarah need to know that?
Yep.
What's in it for Sarah? And, we talk about that all the time. What's in it for me? What's in it for your employees?
Yep.
If you need to answer that question. But quite often what happens is you get bulldozed by some senior leader saying, well, I just want it on there. The good thing for our team is that our senior leader backs us 100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so what she's been able to do is really use Sarah as a persona that has actually become like, she's become a bit viral.
Yeah.
So we've actually now got other people sort of playing Sarah back to us. And so I think that's when you know that you've got a persona that works. But actually what we've done by keep going back to her, and she could be anybody, right? And, in this example, I've actually just sort of stretched her a little bit further by making her a manager. Mm-hmm. But I think what she represents is any one of our employees who are really looking for some simplicity. And actually, you can start adding lots of things like that. It's, Fred who's disengaged, and it's, whoever that's like super happy. But what does that really do? Because actually what you're trying to get at is what is it that person really needs to know that's going to help them, work simpler.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of lose sight of that. And let's be honest, how many of us have done persona work and then it just sits in a file share?
Yeah, for sure.
And you never dust it off.
Yeah.
So I can tell you now, and the team here will attest to it, Sarah's not in a file box. Sarah's like fully like undusted, and she's been talked about a lot. And we've now added additional personas. So we have, I think, is it Mia from Minneapolis?
Yep.
Who actually has nothing to do with the hub, but we were upgrading ServiceNow, and we were thinking about her as being this kind of new employee. Mm-hmm. What does she need to know? If she is going to experience, the new ServiceNow, she might need to figure out how she's going to travel. She's going to have to get an Amex card. She might need to order a headset. And so we started to build this kind of experience for this additional persona. Probably the next persona should be a man. Got two women.
Nah. I think we've had enough of that.
Yeah, fair
Sorry, that's a joke. Well, partly.
Cut it out.
So you mentioned there Sarah's had a promotion. First of all, pass on my congrats.
Well.
Second of all, how did you decide where to take her next on her journey, making it that manager journey? Because I guess it could have been, well, demotion. No, how did you decide that manager was the next journey for Sarah? Prioritising that.
I think from a priority perspective, what we know, if we just take it back specifically to the engagement and Gallup, is that 70% of the variance in an engagement score is down to the manager. So the manager has such an impact.
Yeah.
So, even before we had the hub, even before we were doing Gallup, our entire team has always thought about manager communication. So, Pearson's a company that's been through a massive amount of digital transformation, restructures, reorganizations, new CEO, etc. And so throughout a lot of that transition, Christine, who's in our team, was, basically created a kind of communication for managers back to try and help, our managers wade through all of that kind of, stuff that was coming at them. So managers have always been top of mind, but I think now that we've got Gallup, there's a lot more responsibility and accountability actually on managers in terms of that engagement. And actually what's really interesting is a lot of managers are doing a really good job already.
Yeah.
Some managers just need a little bit of a nudge, right? So maybe they're quite new in role, maybe they need a bit of support. And I think that's why putting Sarah as somebody who's kind of new in role gives you that opportunity to then build into like, what does being a manager feel like at Pearson? Like, what's the expectation? What, how do we do things around here? So there's still some development to do. And I probably took a bit of a leap in terms of the story for the slides, but, thinking about what it feels like to be a manager, whether she's Mia or whether it's Sarah or whether we do have Fred, I don't know. But I think, a manager is such an important part of internal communications. They have such an important role.
Yeah.
We really do need to think about how we support them. And I think I had a conversation last night with somebody.
Well, you can't
I had a lot of conversations last night. But we were talking about the pressure actually that managers are under. So they've got that kind of like bottom up, top down. And we were talking specifically about well-being for managers. And also just like during COVID, they were carrying a lot, right? So whatever they had going on in their own home lives, kids calling all over them while they were trying to work, homeschooling, etc. Plus they were sort of supporting their teams, plus managing up as they always are and sort of managing across with their peers. So managers have a really important job, but there's also a lot on them. And so anything we can do to help them, I think is incredibly
I think it's good that you've evolved that journey like that because it kind of like forces you to think of like quite literally an employee journey. So like what is, as you say, like moving into a manager role, what are the things you need, what's the support versus like what's a more tenured manager going to need. So I hope she really evolves on that journey. I look forward to hearing more about it. So the other thing that obviously came through in your presentation as well was this kind of strategy of content excellence. And I think there are a lot of people that start off with the idea that, content excellence, you always start off with that principle, but over a period of time, you get back into those old habits. What have you built into the culture of the team to help sustain that content excellence?
Yeah, so one thing I'm going to say about content excellence is really hard, super hard. And I think, again, that's where, we've had really, really great leadership in terms of somebody that has, well, first of all, sets a really high bar in terms of content and then supports us. And I would say that's kind of like where our team sort of splits into two, really. So, I think of the team that reports up to me as being really, really important in terms of the content excellence around the structure of the hub, the relationship we have with Unily, how we can make sure that we've got the best features and functionality. And then the other side is the engine of creating that content. Yeah. And, again, that's big part of what Christine does. But, she will probably tell you over a glass of wine, I'm sure, it's really difficult because when you change from what we had, and for those of you who don't know, we had a platform where it was a lot more user-generated, we have like a curated content now. Sometimes the stories coming in, it was a bit of a desert, right? And so you have to go out there, you have to build those relationships, you have to, sort of foster those relationships. And it took a while, but then it's like a snowball effect, right? And so, suddenly you're like batting people off with their stories and they're starting to understand what good content looks like and it makes it a little bit easier. And so the way that we run the team is that there is a meeting on a Monday where the team bring their ideas. So everybody in the team runs a different beat. They bring those ideas to the meeting. We have a sort of kind of short-term look at like what's going on this week, and then a kind of more long-term in terms of pitching ideas. Yep. And then on a Tuesday, what happens is the homepage gets flipped. So we've got on our homepage, we've got the news stories. We also have the people of Pearson. So you saw in the video, there was like, we've had 100 and something people of Pearson. We have product spotlight. And what Christine and the team try to do is really align the story, so the kind of almost like lead story with the product spotlight and then the people behind the spotlight.
Yep.
So there's that kind of alignment on the homepage. And what the that we're trying to do, beyond kind of giving people a reason to believe, is to connect the dots and to really help people understand how sort of these different things are connected. And so, it's taken us some time.
Yeah.
And we've, had to, foster those relationships. But I think it's really starting to sort of take effect. And, we've had weeks where like some really great stories have been authored by the team, and then we're getting great feedback from the leaders who have, either leading those businesses or have been interviewed. And it's really interesting and exciting to see that kind of content come to life and then start to hear that feedback of like, oh, I read that story. It's great. And I met someone on Tuesday who I've known for a long time at Pearson, and she was telling me like, oh, I love the leader series that you've got, because it's like a podcast. And she's like, I listened to it when I dropped my daughter off at nursery on the way home. When's the next one? And I was like, that means that we're kind of getting it right. You know? It means that not just people going to read the content that's there, they're anticipating that content coming. So more to come, I think, on that, more experimentation with the content. And it's exciting. But I go back to where I started. It's hard work. It's hard work, guys, right? It's not easy.
That concept, when you first told me about it and it came up, you didn't even realize how cool it was, but that kind of like newsroom type concept where you're there like challenging each other kind of like forces you to actually, you say people own certain beats, so sometimes you have to justify like, I think we should put out this content and like this is the story. And I guess like that's a like practice that you can take away that means that you don't just get into the rhythm of like, oh, okay, we're communicating this out because someone important asked for it, but actually you're justifying it.
It's hard, right? Because, I mean, I'm a waffler. And so, I mean, the team keeps each other honest for various, different things. Some of us, do write too much. Others...
Not naming any names.
But, we have to critique each other, right? And, sometimes that's really hard. And I think you can only do that if you've got a team that you really trust.
Yeah.
So, I trust the team that they're going to give me great feedback. And sometimes the stories don't even see the light of day, right? So, I'll come to the beat meeting and I'm like, I've got this really exciting story. And everyone's like, why would Sarah care about that? Sarah wouldn't care about that. And then you're like, yeah, okay. So I'm a little bit weak, but it's okay. But I think it's really important because if we are doing that, we are creating quality content. And one of our values is quality. And I don't know if anyone's got a tissue. I had a tissue in my pocket, and then someone was crying outside, and I gave it to them.
Oh.
Thank you. And I was like, I must have a tissue in my pocket because I'll need it. I've got these watery eyes. Anyway,
So whilst you're doing that, that kind of like that newsroom type concept I thought was really cool, and I think forces that mindset of like external comms into internal comms. And you mentioned there that one of the outputs of that is that you have like your homepage changes every Tuesday. And at first I was like, wait, why? But then I thought of like, when like supermarkets, they like change the order so you don't get into your just habit of like, I go here and I go there. Like you buy stuff in that process. I think that was the intention. I've just assumed that. But
well, I think when you work for a big organisation, I think it's really difficult sometimes to understand how things connect together. And so, whilst a lot of the teams over the sort of transition from what we used to do to what we do now are wanting that kind of vanity opportunity, like we want to tell people what we do, we're like, okay, but great, but how do we tell that in a way that's actually really interesting? And, if you go to any website, whether it's like the BBC or whether it's, Cosmo or whatever you're into, you don't read every story. You flick through stories, right? And whatever catches your eyes is the thing that you might tie into. And so if that just happens to be the lead story and then you're like, oh, okay, I want to learn more about that. And there's a product spotlight. And then let's face it, you don't have any of these products or any of these stories without the people behind it. So I can go and discover people and build my network. It's way more powerful, I think, than just those static pages, which is like, this is the person that's in charge of this group, and this is
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah.
Like, you don't learn anything from that because you don't go looking for those sorts of
No,
pages.
for sure. So you spoke about like some new ideas for content and trying to like keep that content excellence up. What have you got next in store for your kind of content excellence strategy? Because news is one thing, but of course there's loads of content that people need to consume, whether it's about alignment or whatever. What's your next thing of content excellence that you're kind of like looking to push for?
So I think, really interestingly, with Stephen Bartlett talking about experimentation, I think that's really a lot of what we're trying to do. I think what we're going to sort of explore is what content really resonates with people. So we try and keep our stories to like a limited number of words so that, people are time poor. Like, I don't know anybody that's got loads of time on their hands to just, mosey on around the internet reading stuff. So we try and keep the stories really brief, but we do also know that people are really into audio. Like, audio is so, I think important because it's something that some people can multitask while they're doing it, whether they're working, but other people might multitask in that, they might go for a walk.
Yeah.
My colleague that I was catching up with on Tuesday was on her way back from, dropping her daughter off at nursery. So I think there's some content that we want to sort of experiment with, more audio, more video. We have amazing talent in the team. So Dina was responsible for the Hubbiversary, but we've also got Marla in our team who has started also sort of generating more of the kind of like media content. So I think there's a lot of exploration, and I think it's also being at events like this and listening to what other people are doing. I think that's the next thing that we'll probably be thinking about. Having a bit of a catch up with the team and being like, right, what did you hear from other people? We've got an assignment that we're going to sort of do a show and tell with, some of the people that are at the event, other customers. So if you want to do a kind of, we'll show you ours, if you show you if you show you ours, you know what I mean. Then come hit us up, because if Brandy's listening, I think we're up 4. We maybe need just one more to get our 5 quota. But, in all seriousness, it's one of the best ways to learn. Like, I love sharing ideas with other people. And I, saw Estee Lauder's homepage up again and remembered that after last year, we were like, we love their ribbon and we love the fact that they've got their apps and tools. How can we do that? So, there's great ways I think we can learn from each other. So I think that's probably the first thing, is just what can we learn from today and yesterday, and then take that back into our content is probably where we'll start.
Okay, and what about when it comes to, so you've clearly got like a good like simplified strategy getting people to engage on that content, but as an education provider, you also have lots of products and services. How do you, what's your kind of plan to get people to engage with some of that content?
Well, our products and services content. Well, we do the product spotlights, which I think are really important. But interestingly, one of the questions that we ask in the engagement survey, there's one open-ended question. So if you're not familiar with the Gallup survey, there's like 12 consisting questions, the 12 elements of engagement, and that's how you get your engagement score. And then you can add in additional questions. So you can have like an indices for, so we've got like an inclusion indices. We're doing an agility one in the survey that we have open at the minute. But one of the open-ended questions is about learning and development. And one of the areas that people were most interested in learning about were our products and services. Right. So we have a number of different ways that we sort of, talk to the different people behind those products and learn more. But one of the things that we probably haven't got quite right is how we present our products and services actually on the hub. So we're experimenting at the minute. I mean, I don't know how many other people fall into the trap of like, we set the hub up last year. I mean, to be fair, we did it in like, was it 5 months?
Yeah, you guys.
So it was
were
very,
like
very
super,
fast.
Yeah.
But we set it up around the structure of our organisation, so the 5 business divisions and the corporate functions. And actually, we've been reflecting and thinking about, is that the right way to think about it? Like, is that really how somebody's going to come into the company and think about how they want to learn? Like, here's the 5 business divisions and corporate functions. Because you can see that from the org structure. Maybe they're more interested in, like, what's Pearson Plus? Or, tell me more about Credly or Mondly. So we're thinking about how we might present some of that stuff, hoping that we've got some inspiration over the last 2 days to think about how we might sort of re-evaluate and redesign that.
Cool. So looks like you're open to feedback there, and I like that you use that Ted Lasso analogy. Because bloody love Ted Lasso.
Amazing.
But B, like, kind of what makes him a good manager? Well, there's loads of things, but one of the things that makes him a good manager is that openness to feedback. And you might remember early on in that series, what is he does? He has that feedback box, and there's loads of stupid stuff that goes in there, but it's little things, and he acts quick on those little things. What are some like things, little bits of feedback that you got that you were able to implement or change based on things you've heard?
Yeah, so I was reflecting on this before we came on because I was like, well, I'm thinking like, what's the best way to sort of answer this question? So I think first and foremost, it's definitely that like, designing the hub around sort of our, organisation as opposed to kind of perhaps what my sort of initial desire was in terms of how we talked about it with Unilee and the rest of the team in the initial sort of conversations was really, it should have been about that kind of employee experience, that employee journey. So, I don't think that's like a kind of quick fix. I just think that's an evolution for us to think about sort of how we sort of change that. I think some of it as well is around design. I think, for me personally, I still fall into this trap a little bit of kind of wanting to kind of make everything kind of clickable. It's a little bit boxy in some of our content, and understanding like how people might really want to read the page or, evolve some of that stuff. And I think along with that comes complexity. So I think we absolutely took so much complexity out of, the experience for employees when we moved to the hub. But I still built some really complicated pages. In fact, Manager's Corner is a really good example because even when I sent this presentation to Casey, initially Manager's Corner was like built between performance, engagement and development. And then I was like, I'm going to have to change my slide because we've changed the page. And we got it down to 2 pages. And then I think just before we went live again, I was like, no, we've got it down to 1 page. But it was like, it felt like we had all this information, and I think you can fall into this trap of like, I'm going to have a sub-page and then a sub-page and a breadcrumb trail, and, I need to have this whole entire page dedicated to this thing. And going back to the team, we have to challenge each other a little bit. Do we really need 3 pages for Manager's Corner? No, we don't. So we pulled it back up. But, we're looking even at some of the experience for like, your desktop versus your mobile. Like we had a lot of pages, right, Dina? We're reducing them. So we hold ourselves to account. We're in the middle of doing a hub audit. And that's probably the hardest bit, I think, about managing a platform. We're only a year in and we're already doing an audit and recognising there's a lot of content that's out of date, can be updated, can be, optimised. So I think we're still learning. And that's probably the biggest way that we're, I think, kind of evolving at the minute is just taking what we started with and going, could we make it better?
Yes. I've got one final question for you before I head to audience Q&A, where we'll have time for a few, I think. I've actually asked more questions than I anticipated. So, and it's really around like data and patterns. You know me, I love a bit of a gossip. And and I've been hearing you've been really pushing the boundaries of like data and analytics within Unilee. And I feel like you're looking for something. Do you have any hunches or hypotheses that you'd be willing to share?
Well, I am pushing the boundaries because I think I'm driving you crazy because I am asking for a lot. I mean, in all fairness, I had a conversation with the product team yesterday, and I think what you guys offer from an analytics perspective, behind the scenes, the dashboards, they are great.
Yeah.
They are way better than, some of the other vendors that we were looking at when we were selecting Unilee. And I think what you're doing to innovate, from what I've heard over the last 2 days, is going to be phenomenal as well. But I think that a lot of companies are also looking at a number of different areas that they may want to look at data. So, even if you think about the fact that we're doing the engagement survey, why did we pick Gallup? Well, because Gallup, is working with a number of other companies, and we're able to benchmark not just ourselves against ourselves, but against other people either in the same sector, same size organisations, against lots of other organisations. And having that quality of data and being able to look at those sort of benchmarks and so on is really important. And that's great for your dashboards, But we want to be able to also take that data and think about things like, if our mission is to give our employees a reason to believe, how can we prove, in fact, that that's what we're able to do? And so we want to be able to plug it into some of the other analytics that we have. And so, yes, I have been asking for that a lot. And I think part of that is because my hypothesis would be that, and this is partly because I've been having these interviews with senior leaders, I keep saying senior leaders, some of the managers who were in the top quartile actually were not senior leaders. So I was stand corrected on that. But what they all had in common was a lot of them spent time on the hub reading those stories, took the stories and then kind of shared them with their team, but with the context of what does this mean for me? So if we know that that's anecdotally happening, I'd love to be able to evidence that's actually happening.
Yes, I really want you to prove that.
So that's my plug.
So hopefully TBC. So
yeah, and I think the fact that Chris was talking a lot about Gallup and that kind of measurement piece, I was like, yes,
both doing
he gets it. So that's awesome. Well, you all get it too, but it's good to hear it on the platform.
Amazing. So I'm going to switch to our audience Q&A. So if you want to ask some questions, and we maybe only have like a few minutes. So
and if we don't get your question, you can send it to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, and I know that's see you at the drinks as well.
Yeah.
Although yesterday we were dancing to Spice Girls, so I'm not sure we'll be discussing high performance culture as much. The top voted question here is, how do you get people to put forward content and ideas outside of the communications team?
So that's a really great question. And I think the way that we do that is networking. So what's been really great about us being here this week is that the entire team were in the office on Tuesday, and we were meeting with people from across the different businesses and functions in person, starting to mine stories. So for me personally, I had some meetings with Cam in the team, and it was a really great opportunity for us to start thinking about some stories that will come out sort of through over the next couple of months. I know Adia in the team was meeting with our assessment and qualifications business, and it was an opportunity because she's based in the US to meet some of the folk that were in the UK and really just keep having those conversations. And I think what's really interesting is the people that we're having those conversations with are now starting to understand the type of stories we're looking for.
Yep.
So they're not necessarily coming to us so much with the stories where we're like, yeah, that one's not going to make it onto the hub. They're actually coming to us with stories and we're like, yes, we love that. Let's work that through and bring that to life. So I think it's, again, I'm going to say it again, it's hard work, right?
Yep.
Like every single one of the team is sort of, mining those relationships, having those conversations. And then the fact that we connect together, because then what we might find is that one of our stories connects with, a different story that we're looking at, and then we're able to connect those dots again for our employees.
Great. So, and also, how do you measure content performance?
Well, I mean, Unilever provides some really great analytics.
I didn't plant that, I promise. It is here, the second top one.
But interestingly, we are trying to get like a little bit clever with some of our titles. So we didn't just go to Coney Island when we were in New York a couple of weeks ago. We did a sort of storytelling workshop. And one of the things that we were sort of thinking about is how do you really tell a great story, and starting to think about how we can not clickbait titles, but like what titles, what's going to get someone, what's going to make you curious and want to click and read that story, right? So the things that we're looking at is, we can look at views and likes and stuff like that, but in comparison, what resonated.
Yep.
And also not just like the stories, but like did the video resonate more, or the audio, or did a campaign really resonate with people? I think we'll see more experimentation of that, and I'm more curious to see, what type of person likes what type of content. Because you have to have a good content mix, right? It's not one size fits all.
Definitely. You actually reminded me of something where I was like having a snoop around the like all up analytics within Unilever, trying to work out like across everyone what are the trends within high performing content. And as sad as it is, clickbaity type titles, things that with a clear call to action that are trying to get people to engage, always perform better. So it does help the outcome. And so kind of not just simplifying and showing what that content is called, but actually being like, right, if the outcome here is I want better engagement, then I need to give a clear call to action in it, or try and get some engagement in that title. So that I think that's a good approach. I think we've got time for one more question, which is, what do you think is the role of communications in upskilling brand new people managers? It's a weighty one.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, interestingly, when we go back to the engagement survey, one of the other things that our employees told us that they wanted upskilling in is communication.
Yeah.
And I think, you and I were talking yesterday about, is communication like a dark art? Like, in some ways, I think people think it is, which is great, right? Because that means that's why we're employed and everyone doesn't think that they can do it. But the truth is, being a great communicator, is really important, whatever level of the organisation you're in. So do we have a responsibility? For sure. And I'd say the way that we do that at Pearson is through the quality of the content, the consistency of the content. So we have a style guide that the team has worked painstakingly hard on, and we have, we hold that line. We set the standard, and so this is the standard that we're going to meet with all the content that goes on the hub. And actually, that's starting to catch on. So I know this week that someone contacted Brandy, our SVP, so our manager, and said, "Oh, this is great. Can I use this for external content?" We were like, "Sure," because it's a really great document. The team have worked incredibly hard on it. So I think that is where we're sort of being able to add that value. Is like we set the standard, and hopefully, it catches fire.
Okay, so that I always find any time I chat to you even throughout these 2 days, I've got so many good insights. Like I'm always learning more, and so like I always hold you up as an example of like the internal comms team as the future. And of course, you're right; it's still about like learning and experimenting. But there are such good underlying principles here, and I've even learned a lot in this conversation. So thank you, and everyone join me in thanking Kim.
Thank you.
So we'll be back soon for the awards, but for now we're going to grab a drink.
We are.
And take our seats, and we'll see you back here in a second.